Rough Trade is giving away a third of the first 3 months of the Rough Trade Club plus new music membership exclusively to 101 Part-Time Jobs listeners. Become a member of Rough Trade Club New Music and you'll receive the Rough Trade Album of the Month straight to your door every month on an exclusive vinyl pressing with bonus material. Club members have received exclusive pressings of albums from Sufjan Stevens, Sprints, The Last Dinner Party, English Teacher, and Over Mono, just to name a few, this past year alone. Sign up using the promo code CLUB101POD and you'll get Rough Trade's Album of the Month, Camera Obscura's Look to the East, Look to the West for a third of the usual price. By signing up, you'll be getting Rough Trade's exclusive issue of the album on opaque purple in a gatefold sleeve, plus a bonus CD containing 5 demos. Don't want the album of the month but still want all the benefits? Sign up to the standard tier using Club 101 Pod and you'll still get the first month free. You'll also get free shipping on all orders, 10% off at the bar and on secondhand vinyl in store, and exclusive access to sold out Rough Trade events. So don't hang around. Head to roughtrade.com/club and sign up with the code CLUB101POD. That's CLUB101POD and claim money off Rough Trade's Album of the Month today. This offer is for UK residents only. Do you play in bands? I did for the longest time. And I wish that I knew that DistroKid was a thing. I don't even think it existed back then. DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming services. When you get DistroKid, you can see a DistroKid bank and withdraw your earnings. You get notified when you've earned royalties and you can withdraw via the app. And you can even check your streaming stats on Spotify and Apple. Get 30% off your first year on DistroKid by going to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. 30% off for your first year. That's not bad. We know it's a tough world out there. Why don't you make it easier for yourself? And to get 30% off that free year as an artist, where you get 100% of your royalties and earnings, go to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. All right, stay with me. I'll be right back after this.
A house on a hill, one little corner.
Hey, welcome along. It's 101 Part-Time Jobs. I'm Giles Bidder and I speak to bands and artists who are trying to do everything they can to make it work as a musician. We all know that right now is probably one of the hardest it's ever been to be an independent musician. And I want to hear these stories, these humanizations of something that we usually consider something so far away. I want to get the artists' stories in their own words. On today's episode, I speak with Katherine Priddy, the wonderful folk artist who's just released a new album, The Pendulum Swing. It's a gorgeous, sweeping record with so many moments that just stop me in my tracks. I heard it on the BBC Radio 2 folk show, which Sean Keaveney is currently covering until early June. Katherine Priddy was a new name to me, but I immediately fell into it, and I was excited to speak with her. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you subscribe on Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening. We put out 2 episodes every week, me and a small team, and we'd love to have you along for it. Shout out to our sponsors, 2000 Trees Festival. 2000 Trees is an awesome independent festival in Cheltenham, just a few hours away on the train from London, if that's where you're coming from. They've always got a stacked lineup, and This year's no different. From the 10th to the 13th of July, you can be seeing the Gaslight Anthem, the Chats, Manchester Orchestra, Frank Turner, Hot Mulligan, the Nova Twins, Skinny Lister, and so many great bands in a field in Cheltenham, having a great time at an independent festival. And it feels that way. You come away from it feeling like full up. I've gone to 2000 Trees many years in a row, and I always leave with a good feeling. I highly recommend it. If you're looking for a festival this summer, head to 2000trees.co.uk, and if you use the voucher code 101pod, you can get 50 quid straight off your weekend ticket. All right, coming up is Katherine Priddy on 101 Part-Time Jobs. 101 Part-Time Jobs.
I think kind of discussing money and stuff is seen as quite an ugly conversation, and I suppose it is in some ways. But I think when you're, I think it's an important thing for musicians to discuss with other musicians as well. Not just because of kind of we're all self-employed or kind of working out how all that sort of thing works, but also in terms of discussing fees and things, I think is important.
Yeah.
Because if you suddenly might think, oh God, I thought I was being paid well, and now I'm realising that I could have been asking for more, or, vice versa. So I think it's important to have those conversations.
And those walled gardens, or those walled informations, that's not benefiting the musicians.
No.
That's benefiting other people.
Absolutely.
Somewhere.
Yeah. But I think as well, it's quite a sensitive subject for musicians as well, isn't it? Because we've all been told that's not a real job.
Yeah.
Or kind of all people. I get that people are curious about how money works with music, but
well, there's always going to be that conversation. Is like, well, you chose to do it, and I'm not sure if I really buy that personally. I mean, I think my view on it and my upbringing and the people that I've met throughout my life have made me, and the jobs I've had in my life have made me think, well, I'm not going to be. How do you put it? I don't want to work a job I don't want to work. And because if you work a job that makes you sad, that's not a good life. No. And that's my life. That's no one else's. By me saying, I don't want to work that job, that's not me saying that I'm better than anyone, hypothetically. It's like the ideal situation is to find a hobby that you like enough that you educate and inform yourself enough, and then you become a sort of more or less sort of towards an expert in that field, and then you get a job for that. Why is that any different for musicians?
Yeah.
I think that element of being like, well, you choose to be a musician, you choose to be poor, you choose to be skin.
Yeah.
I don't really buy that, because we all need music. Music's a trade.
No, yeah, I agree. And I feel very lucky to be doing something that I love, and I'm also very aware that there's a lot of people that aren't in that position, and that's not necessarily their choice either. Like they're kind of doing what they're doing because through necessity or through
everyone is almost, aren't they?
Yeah, that's just where your life's led you. And I don't think you should be punished for that either, of that kind of, well, you've just got to suck it up because that's what you've chosen to do, and that's not really how, I don't know.
Yeah. I
think you need to be grateful and also accept that, you deserve the best for yourself.
Yeah, because you're yourself, you're the one you're the only person living your life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look back in your career in music, what was the first moment that you thought, oh, okay, I could do this. This doesn't have to be a hobby, or even a secret hobby if it was.
Yeah, I think it was when after I released, I suppose the first time I thought, oh, maybe I could actually have a little go at this, was when, actually, I think it was the first time I ever got paid for a gig, which was almost like a little open mic thing at a pub down the road. And I got given a £5, and I wasn't expecting to get anything. And I suddenly thought, oh, okay, a £5. And I opened a new bank account the next day and put that £5 in the bank account. I thought, right, that's in my music bank account.
Yeah, no money too small.
Yeah, and I think making that decision, and ever since then, all those little fees, I put all into the separate bank account. And then I started looking at that and thinking, okay, well, I've made 50 quid, 100 quid, 150 quid. What can I do with that? And then I started making some little homemade EPs and stuff and selling them. And it suddenly, I think it was still felt like a hobby at that point. But in the back of my head, I thought, perhaps this could be something. But I think it wasn't until I really started doing bigger gigs that I thought, okay, maybe this could move beyond the hobby thing, and that's something I really wanted to work towards. But yeah.
And you're looking at those kind of supports. What are those bigger gigs? Is that kind of looking at people that you're a fan of and being like, I can see myself supporting them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones for me was it's an amazing guitarist and songwriter called Richard Thompson, who was in a band, Fairport Convention, that my parents listened to when I was younger. And I think I did a couple of tours with him, and that first support tour, it was like a real kind of I've made it moment, because I suddenly thought I'm opening the stage for someone who I've grown up listening to and as a hero. Yeah. And that for me was such a huge kind of milestone and kind of changed my perception of what I did. I think it was just quite validating in that respect.
Yeah.
But I still get imposter syndrome all the time, and I think that's very normal as well.
Very normal. And I think it's such a journey to go from something that's fun when you come back from school or work or whatever it is, and to then actually take that seriously.
Yeah,
I think we all have these parts inside of ourselves that, you know, are creature comforts. Maybe we're big into movies or comic books, whatever it may be, and you do naturally take it seriously inside, but then to bring that seriousness outside of your body and to hold yourself, you know, to hold yourself with that seriousness. How did you find doing that, you know, taking yourself seriously on the outside? I
think I'm getting better at it. I completely agree. When some things felt, and I think this is when jobs that you feel very passionate about and jobs where pleasure and work begin to cross over, I think that's I think you're more at risk of having imposter syndrome there, because there's a lot of times where I think, surely this isn't, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. I can't believe this is work, which is a really good feeling. But on the other hand, you kind of think, well, it's not. You start doubting yourself whether it really is valid. And yeah, I think I find it quite, I feel quite vulnerable doing music, because obviously you pour so much of yourself into these songs, into these releases. And when people say, oh, you know, it's not personal, you think, well, it is actually, it does feel really personal. And it's really hard to separate that personal from public and from work. So yeah, I do struggle with that, I think, but it's just important to take stock of what you're doing, and always make time to look backwards as well as forward as well, and think about where you've come from.
Yeah. Do you keep a journal or anything like that you can go back to?
I don't actually, but I think in these modern days with social media, that can be quite helpful, because every now and then a little Facebook memory will pop up of like 10 years ago or 11 years ago. I think there was one the other day where it's the first time I'd seen my name written on the little blackboard outside a pub where I was playing. I just, I thought, that's so cool.
Yeah, awesome.
And it's still cool. I mean, even if I'm doing bigger things now, those things were still just as important and just as big. So it's important to remember that.
This new record, Pendulum Swing, newish, I guess it's always a new record until the next one. I mean, it's got such a great sound to it, and it does sound vulnerable, and it's two sides of the same sword there, that vulnerability. Yeah,
I think this one, I did feel quite nervous putting this out, partly because the second album syndrome, and it does feel more difficult the second time around, because I think there's an expectation there that wasn't there perhaps with the first one.
Right.
But yeah, these songs are really personal. They're about family members. They're not all about it, but there's a couple about family members. There's one about the house where I grew up. There's it's songs with me kind of wrestling with what I want, either in terms of home or in terms of relationships and things. And on the first album, they just weren't. It was more kind of in the mythological realm, and this album does feel deeply personal, and so I think that is really, really nerve-wracking putting something like that out, because I'm just aware. But then I think you have to remember that actually when you're listening to music, you're very rarely thinking about the musician when you're listening to it. You're applying what you're hearing to your own life, and in that way it's actually quite cathartic. So I think I need to get over myself. People aren't thinking about me.
and no matter what's happened to you, other people have had a similar, maybe same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of our family troubles, a lot of the sort of whirlwind times, no one's that unique about it. And that's a very positive thing. You can share that.
It is. Yeah. And I think that's part of the joy of actually releasing an album, because for ages it's just sitting in your head, and kind of you're worrying about it, and you're thinking, you spend so long focusing on the tiny details of the sound, and then the marketing and all this kind of stuff, and then the minute it's out there, it's not yours anymore, and it takes on a life of its own, and it's really exciting to see. I was talking to a friend beforehand, actually, who was just reassuring me and was saying they don't like to see an album and think, oh, I hope it does well. They always think, I wonder where it'll take me, or I wonder what it'll do. Yeah. Because it becomes something else, and people start to attach their own stories to it, and that's really, really rewarding.
Yeah. And right now, with the way that streaming is, it's not like you either on Top of the Pops or you're not there. That doesn't happen now. There's not one place, whether it's Top of the Pops or MTV or, with The Box, if you remember that TV channel. So there are all these different scenes that you can become part of, and that's part of your journey. And whether that happens quickly or slowly, it's actually irrelevant.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an incredibly rewarding process, and it is worth the nerves and the putting yourself out there. But yeah, it is a difficult thing. I think I find releasing recorded music much more nerve-wracking than stepping out on stage and singing, actually. Because that's the bit that everyone always goes, God, I don't know how you do it. That must be really scary. Yeah. I think at least you can walk off the stage again. But when you record something, it's out there and it's done. It's particularly, like you said, with the internet now, it's there for good.
So where are you with the when you mentioned earlier, everything that, we're all going to have this thought, relationships, where we're living, how much money we're making. I feel like it's the law of three. What was it? You can have a car, a partner, and a house, but you can't have all three. You've got to have two. You're only going to ever have two of the three.
That's probably true, isn't it? Well, I definitely don't think I'll be buying a house anytime soon. I don't have a car either.
Yeah. Where do you live?
South Birmingham.
Okay. Did you grow up around there?
Yeah, I did. I was born in South Birmingham, kind of lived in the general area most of my life. I went to uni in Brighton, so lived down there for a few years and then came back to do music.
Did you start writing songs before you moved to Brighton?
Yeah, I'd started writing them when I was about 14, 15. But I was just crippled with anxiety about it all, and I didn't want to sing in front of anyone at all. I've always been quite good at public speaking. That doesn't seem to bother me, but for ages I just couldn't bear the thought of singing or playing guitar in front of someone. But my teacher at school really encouraged me to do it, so I just sang for her once. Great. And then slowly got into it. So I was kind of writing before I was performing, really. And kind of I did put up the odd video on YouTube and stuff when I was feeling brave.
Does it go back to that teacher? Is that where you can trace it back to?
Yeah, I think so. They were really encouraging, and they also put me forward for this competition called the Next Brit Thing, which I think was run in association with the Brit Awards. And I went along with it, and to my horror, I kept getting through the rounds, and I eventually got to the final. So my first ever gig outside of my village folk club was at the O2 in London in front of McFly. Wow. And it was honestly kind of the best and worst day of my life.
They were side stage?
No, they were judging. McFly were the judges.
Wow, okay.
It was very surreal.
Bet you're glad when that day ended.
A little bit. But yeah, teachers are very, very, very powerful and important in that respect, because I probably wouldn't have ever done it if they hadn't said, you can sing and you should have a go.
People talk about going outside their comfort zones. Sometimes you don't know what that means, but that seems like an example of one of those.
Yeah, and it was really strange because, like I said, I'd kind of, before I went and did the Next Brit Thing, I'd started playing at the monthly folk night at the men's club at the end of my parents' garden. And I used to find that my hands would shake so much. I'd really struggle to play guitar, and I always had to sit down because my knees would be shaking so much as well. And then I did that Next Brit Thing competition, and on that final, I remember going on stage and I just didn't shake. And I honestly think I just scared myself to the point that I was just like, right, this is too weird now. And I haven't really shook. Haven't really shook much
Never
since.
Shook much. Shake, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of
sounds better shaken, but shook sounds like the right one, doesn't it?
I should know. I did English literature at uni. I should know that. It's embarrassing.
No, not at all. The English language is always changing.
Yes, malleable.
That's why we use swear words, because they start to mean...
that's true.
Well, I just think the older generations don't like swear words, and I completely understand it. I completely respect it. I feel like for younger people, swear words mean a bit more. You know, they have more context.
Yeah, that might be true, actually.
Maybe it's because there's been more films. There's been more films and TV shows where it's in the language.
Yeah, and their context changes. Yeah. Although some of the swear words we use now, which we find incredibly offensive, were common practice back in like the 1600s and 1500s and stuff. So there we go.
101, 101, part-time jobs. 101, 101, 101, part-time jobs. How have you found the last few years, since music sort of taken a more permanent place in your life? How have you found the balance of playing, writing, recording, going on tour, your brain being in that space, but also that other side of paying for it, because the music's not always good. Even people at the top of their game are doing other side jobs.
Yeah.
So how have you found that balance, and what's that balance looks like for you?
So I've always had part-time jobs until like the past couple of years, and I felt like that was really important for me personally, because I think I didn't want to put too much pressure on music too soon, and maybe that was a slight lack of commitment on my side, and thinking that it wasn't going to be a full-time thing. But equally, I just think it's important not to put too much pressure on something that you love, in case that you start to lose the love for it. So I always had part-time jobs, and then was be gigging on the side, which worked for me, and it paid the bills. So it kind of took that pressure off music, and I was actually able to enjoy it and work on it without thinking, got to write this song, I've got to do like 3 gigs to pay the rent this month or whatever it is. So that was good. But it was COVID that changed things, because I had been working in a bar and restaurant, and then obviously that closed over lockdown, and at that point I suddenly thought, right, I thought, okay, this is going to be a new starting point now. I've lost that work, but I was still able to do online gigs and all that sort of thing. And so that was when I went self-employed, just before COVID, actually. And then since then, it's been pretty much a full-time thing. I've done a bit of copywriting and stuff.
Great.
Kind of like portable laptop work, report writing for a technical company.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Nice. Yeah. Do you think it's less scary that lots of other people are doing a similar thing? And, we live in a life that's far more temporary. Earlier you mentioned, I'm the same. You mentioned you might not be able to buy a house ever. I'm most people under the age of 60 or 55 are probably the same, really realistically. So I wonder if that kind of gives you a bit of support there, a bit of buffer to say, like, life's feels so temporary anyway, temporary in the sense of you're renting things, people are getting cars on lease, a lot of jobs are contract based, not full-time. A lot of most jobs I've had have been contract and not full-time. So do you think that kind of helps that push you over the line to say, yeah, I'm going to give this a go?
Yeah, I think so. And it is nice to know that everyone's in the same boat in that respect. And I think having done part-time jobs my whole life up until the last couple of years, I actually find that reassuring as well, because I know that it's there, and I know that if this doesn't work, there is something else you can do. There is bar work, there is all of that stuff, and there's no shame in those jobs. And I think
absolutely not.
Certainly when I was working at the bar and restaurant, there were some people who were doing it because they wanted a career in hospitality, but there was a lot of people who were doing it to fortify what they really wanted to do, like whether that was music or acting or something else. Yeah. And I think it's actually really reassuring knowing that that's the case for so many people. And you're right, that things are temporary and you can always change, and a lot of people now, there isn't that culture of you come out of school, you get your job and you're in it, you pick your career. A lot more people are a lot more flexible with their jobs and things now. Yeah. That's not to say I hope that music is my career, but even within that, there's a lot of diversification. There's finding other ways to work within the music industry and that sort of thing. So
yeah. meanwhile you're exploring yourself, and like, you know, you're spending time to think about yourself and read books and write music and and enjoy the excitement of all of that.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying now that music is a full-time thing. I'm actually trying to, talking of like work-life balance and stuff, I think I am trying to treat it almost more like a 9-to-5, in that it's partly for my own kind of mental health. I need that structure.
Yeah.
So otherwise there's a lot, you know, between tours and gigs, you're just kind of sitting around. But also just in terms of songwriting and things, I'm now having to see it less as I might write a song at some point, or I'll see if anything comes out, and actually thinking, no, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give myself an hour with my guitar and actually try. Yeah. So I think it's quite motivational to kind of go all in like that as well.
Definitely. And it doesn't have to be sitting down with the guitar. You could also be reading or going to the cinema, or doing, you know, putting yourself in that space where you learn something new. New experiences. Yeah, reading actually is a big one for me. I find that if I'm not reading, I'm not writing either. And I've noticed that because I did literature at uni. And then by the time I left uni, I'd read so much for, 3 years. I kind of felt like I needed a bit of a break from reading. But when I stopped reading, I found it hard to write as well, which I guess makes sense, because if you're putting words out, you need to be putting words in as well. Maybe. Yeah. But this is it. But yeah, reading and just making time for that kind of creative space is really important. 101 part-time jobs, 101 part-time jobs. This conversation is always going to be like an everyday one. This is not the first or the last time anyone will, think probably in our life, there's probably never going to be some ultimate support that's going to come out from the government or elsewhere that's going to make being a musician an easy, or easier thing to do. No. And with that in mind, I like to ask people about their sort of work gaffes, their biggest work fails. Usually, if it to do with music, so many people are late for sound checks, they couldn't get out of work, and people miss transport. Have you got any memories where work's really rubbed up against your playing? Possibly, yes. I don't know if it was necessarily work affecting this, but I knew I had to do a BBC radio interview, and it was in London, and I travelled down earlier that day, and I had a late bar shift the night before, and so I was knackered, and that was the only thing that was difficult with doing the bar work and then gigging the next day and trying to fit all of that in. I was permanently tired, and I went to the wrong BBC studio, and it turns out that London's quite a big place. I didn't really think about that, and I was completely at the wrong BBC studio and had to get this taxi over London, and I arrived, I think I had about 2 minutes before they went live on air. Wow. And it was that taxi ride was the worst taxi ride of my life, and I was just getting like missed calls on my phone. I was like, oh god, that wasn't good. So yeah. Did you get there in the end? Did you get there on time? I did get there in the end, okay. But I was out of breath. It wasn't ideal. Not in a good place spiritually. Not in the best place. No. So yeah, sleep is important, as is checking your emails and reading all the details. So there was Katherine Priddy here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. We've just announced another live podcast in London. On Monday, the 3rd of June, I'll be speaking with Alfie Templeman, the multi-instrumentalist, a great songwriter, releasing his new album later that week. Come along. Go to 101parttimejobs.com/live. You can also head to our Instagram, 101 Part-Time Jobs Pod, and on Twitter or X. You can find the links there. Tickets are through Dice. Would love to have you there. Shout out to DistroKid. If you're in a band, or if you've got a relative that plays music and they want to put out their own record, want to be their own record label, they can sign up to a DistroKid account and get 30% off their first year when using the voucher code by going to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. You can join 1 million other artists in putting out their own records, albums, singles, EPs, making sure they get on Apple, Spotify, TikTok, YouTube, and make all their own royalties. It's cheap, it's straightforward, it's easy, and it's fun. Head to distrokid.com/VIP/101pod. 101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.